Hello and welcome again. This is Lita Downs from the Center for Faculty Excellence at Walden University, and I would like to welcome you to today's paper presentation, Home as Workplace for Online Faculty During COVID-19 Self-Isolation. Before I hand things over to our presenters, I do want to go over some Adobe items quickly. On the lower part of the screen, there's the audio settings dial where you can adjust your volume throughout the session today. We do have a chat box. When placing comments or questions in the chat box, please select all panelists and attendees. Unfortunately, it automatically selects all panelists, so make sure to select all panelists and attendees so everyone can benefit from your questions and or comments. We do have closed captioning if you should need that. The button is at the lower part of the screen. Finally, there's a view options dial in the upper part of the screen. With that, you can toggle back and forth from full screen to a regular size screen. You can also zoom in on the screen using that function. Today's presenters are Dr. Lee Stadtlander. Dr. Stadtlander is the Associate Director of Faculty Research Training here at Walden in the Center for Research Quality. We also have Dr. Amy Sickle. Amy Sickle is a Program Director of the PhD Psychology Program. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Sickle. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Good to be here. So when we started looking at the literature for online and virtual work, and in particular relative to COVID, we learned that 88% of organizations have encouraged or required their employees to work at home due to COVID-19. Most universities moved online in spring and many remaining online this fall. Little is known as to how faculty have made that emergency transition from land-based to working, nor is it known how self-isolation has affected previously online faculty. Next slide, please.
We previously did a study and found that the majority of online participants consciously separated their home and workplace through using a separate room area like an office or maintaining a work schedule. Faculty mentioned that they really liked the flexibility and the ability to control for potential interruptions. And these they saw as an advantage to working at home. Negatives to the work environment at home were feeling lonely and missing working with colleagues face to face. We found that participants tended to manage their physical, functional, and psychological comfort in performing their work-related tasks, primarily through integration of their workspace with their home needs and using time management and control of work surroundings. Next slide.
And the Stadtlander et al. Study from 2017 was building upon work done by Hirkanen and colleagues in 2012. And they provided a model of virtual work environment. And here you see the focus on physical fit or physical comfort. And according to Hirkanen's findings, they found that both tools and places of work contributed to physical fit. With regard to places, in particular, they found layouts such as if it was a quiet environment, if there was a privacy issue, as well as ergonomics, the extent to which that work environment was conducive to what they were trying to do. And the Stadtlander et al. Study added to that by looking at online faculty in terms of finding out that the place of work was important relative to integration of workspace with home needs. And that factored in a couple of different ways. One, the separation of the workspace from the home, but then simultaneously the understanding that it was a workspace within home, meaning that there would be children or pets or other aspects of life that would inevitably filter in. Next slide, please.
Second part of the model is the functional fit within the home. Hirkanen, which I can never pronounce, had two aspects. They had connectivity to the internet and then the use of time. And they looked at it primarily through the technical problems that might be present with devices. We added the idea of time management, that people structured how they worked by deciding to work during specific hours. Next slide.
And here is the aspect of psychosocial fit. And as you can see again, the Hirkanen group found that territoriality, privacy, control were key elements to psychosocial fit for their participants. Stadtlander et al. Found that control of work surroundings. So in particular, the examples provided here of the ability to have our books around us, the ability to have beautiful views in our office, that these aspects were associated with control. Next slide, please.
So our current study is a convergent mixed method study. It started in May 2020, which was 1 month post self-isolation. We sent out email interviews with Likert questions and open-ended qualitative questions with 20 online and 6 land-based faculty. And then in July 2020, 3 months post self-isolation, we did a follow-up email survey with the same participants. We used the Likert questions and 5 open-ended questions. And we will go into a little more detail on that in a minute. Next slide.
And so the research questions are quantitative questions asked, how does self-isolation affect feelings of workplace satisfaction? How does self-isolation affect how often faculty listen, watch, read about COVID-19? How does self-isolation affect faculty's self-described feelings of stress? Our qualitative questions asked first, what is the effect of self-isolation on online faculty's workspace and indices of physical fit? What is the effect of self-isolation on how they do their work and indices of functional fit? And what is the effect of self-isolation on their feelings about their work regarding psychosocial fit? Next slide, please.
So after we received IRB approval, ads were placed in Walden's Center for Faculty Excellence newsletter over a 1 month period during May 2020. There were a total of 20 online faculty that responded and completed the online interview. During that same 1 month period, we placed ads in social media, Facebook and LinkedIn for land-based faculty who were teaching online as an emergency due to COVID. Despite repeated recruitment attempts, we only had 6 land-based faculty respond and complete the interview. So saturation appeared to have been reached with this smaller group. So we did stop recruitment to avoid having the time in isolation different for the 2 groups. The interview consisted of the 13 demographic questions, 5 Likert quantitative questions, and 12 qualitative. Next slide.
And the follow-up interviews, 2 months after the original interview, so 3 months in self-isolation, to assess changes over time for participants. This consisted of 5 open-ended questions and 3 Likert questions repeated from the original interview. 20% of online and 83% of land-based faculty returned the follow-up email interview. Next slide.
So this is the demographics for our final participant group. As you can see, we had 3 males and 23 females total. 6 African Americans, 17 Caucasians, 2 Hispanic. Where the 2 groups differed was in terms of their highest degree. In the land-based group, 3 of the participants had just a high terminal master's, there we go, while 3 had a terminal doctorate. Next slide.
And taking a look at these demographics, there's no significant difference here, as you can see, between the groups relative to age, years at the current university or total years teaching. As a point of reference for age, the online faculty ranged between 41 and 79 years of age. The land-based faculty ranged between 47 and 67 years of age. Next slide.
The results. For our first research question, how does self-isolation affect feelings of workspace satisfaction? They rated their satisfaction with their home workspace before and then after social isolation on a scale of 1 dissatisfied to 5 satisfied. We did repeated measures in NOVA and found that there was a difference only between the two groups, where online faculty showed more satisfaction with their workspace. There was no difference pre-post nor for the interaction. Next slide.
So for research question 2, how does self-isolation affect how often faculty listen, watch, read about COVID-19? Again, using the same scale from 1 never to 5 always. There was no significant difference. You can see that land-based faculty had a slightly higher mean, but there was no significant difference. We did find a correlation. Less faculty reported reading about COVID-19, the higher their reported current satisfaction with the workplace, as you can see at 0.032. Next slide.
Third research question. How does self-isolation affect faculty's self-reported feelings of stress? They rated their stress on a scale of 0, which was no stress, to 10, extremely stressed. There was no difference between online and land-based faculty. The higher their current satisfaction, however, with their home workplace, the lower their repeated stress level. Next slide.
And turning to the first qualitative question, what is the effect of self-isolation on online faculty's workspace? And to take a look at physical fit, 55% of online and 16.7% of land-based faculty indicated they separated their work environment from their home environment in some way. And some examples of this. So the main method of separating work and home tended to be through using a separate room or a separate office. As participant 7 online faculty said, I do my work in my office. Being in my office helps me to focus. A few participants did mention restricting their hours of work. As participant 10 online faculty stated, I dedicate specific hours to work environment and home environment. I have a 17-year-old at home doing remote learning. We make sure that we have work time and personal time. Next slide.
Those that didn't separate home from work mentioned a variety of reasons for that. No, I like the ambient noise. It was an online faculty member. Not so much. The space we usually use for family meals is always covered with paper, pens, computer cords, etc. And that was a land-based faculty member. And no, there's no separation of work and home. I feel that there's no division, and that also was a land-based faculty member. Next slide.
Research question 5, what is the effect of self-isolation on how they do their work, looking at functional fit? The majority in both groups indicated that work times stayed the same pre and post COVID-19. Online faculty stated, nothing has changed from my daily work routine. Stay home requirements has curbed my work-related travel, and I also do not have access to any community locations, malls for example, in which to break up the day. 2 of the land-based faculty and 1 online mentioned that they were working longer hours post-COVID-19. Land-based participant said, since COVID self-isolation, I've had to spend anywhere between 4 and 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, redesigning the course. Next slide.
Research question 6. What's the effect of self-isolation on their feelings about their work, getting at the psychosocial fit? The majority of both groups, 60% of online and 66% of land-based, reported that the ambience had changed negatively after COVID-19 in their home. A great example, I feel as if I have to work from home, even though it's been my choice for years. I feel locked in, even though my work duties and responsibilities have not changed. I do not feel that work from home has given me the freedom it used to, in that I could go to appointments during the day or out to lunch with a friend. And now those freedoms are not available. And that was an online faculty member. Next slide.
Another example from an online faculty. The greatest benefit for online faculty, about 30%, was the opportunity to spend more time with family, such as this participant who said, I get to see my family so much more. For land-based faculty, the greatest advantage for 66% was not having to commute. This land-based faculty member said, I do not miss the commute. I have more time to relax in the morning with my coffee and husband and kids. I feel like I've been able to take better care of my home and errands, etc. 20% of online faculty reported the biggest disadvantage was their own negative emotions. This online faculty stated, I find I'm more anxious and as a result tend to see things in a negative way. Next slide.
33% of the land-based and 10% online faculty mentioned being busier. I'm just much busier at work than before. It seems our students have much more time to work on their dissertations, which is great, but I feel swamped, and that was online. 33% of the land-based faculty mentioned feeling guilty working from home. I feel guilty if I take a longer walk or do laundry, while at the same time, I like being able to. Next slide.
So the follow-up study, 2 months following the initial interview, so 3 months in self-isolation, we conducted a follow-up interview of the same participants to examine changes over time using questions repeated from the first interview. Next slide.
Some of our key findings from that. We looked at workplace satisfaction, did a repeated measures ANOVA before COVID, 1 month into isolation and 3 months into isolation by group, online versus land-based. And we found only a difference between the two groups where online faculty were more satisfied overall. There was no difference for time or for the interaction. Next slide, sorry.
And for the question asking about reading of COVID-19, we did a repeated measures ANOVA. So 1 month post-isolation versus 3 months by group, online versus land-based. The only difference was for time. So this, as you can see, the significant results at 0.047 indicating that faculty were reading less about COVID-19 as time passed. So that was the only difference that we found. We did find a correlation between stress level reported at 1 month post-isolation and reading about COVID-19 at 3 months. Higher stress at 1 month, that should be a positive 0.444. Higher stress at 1 month meant they tended to continue reading more about COVID-19. Next slide.
When asked at 3 months post-isolation, 58% of the online and none of the land-based faculty responded that they had made no changes into how or when they did their online work. 23% of online, 60% of land-based faculty mentioned they find themselves moving locations of their work around their home. Example, I've not really changed where I do my online work, but I have varied where I sit, and now I use my desktop computer more often. Next slide.
29.4% of online faculty and 100% of land-based made negative comments about how they felt about work. Some examples. About my teaching position at the college, I felt detached from my students. Also, I have a heightened sense of anxiety about job security and such. That was a land-based participant. The job has become even more tedious due to the constant Zoom meetings and emails that seem to be excessive. Also land-based. Next slide.
So discussion. Consistent over time, online faculty reported greater workplace satisfaction over the land-based faculty. Self-reported feelings of stress were associated with decreased workplace satisfaction at time 1. Online faculty also reported significantly less feelings of stress than did land-based faculty at time 2. Next slide.
More of a sense of control does appear to result in more satisfaction with surroundings. Online faculty clearly had pre-established a separate workspace in contrast to few of the land-based faculty. Perhaps this provided them with more feelings of control for the online faculty during the pandemic. Some online and land-based faculty indicated they would change work locations around the house, which may also be interpreted possibly as gaining control over time and how and where they work. Next slide.
And this is our revised model of the physical fit, where we've incorporated at the places of work that they may change locations in the house. And this occurred primarily due to the 3-month self-isolation. Next slide.
Psychosocial issues. Both online and land-based faculty reported self-isolation had negatively affected the ambience of their work environment and their emotions at 1 month self-isolation. Some land-based faculty reported negative feelings about increased work hours and technology requirements and concern about work quality, as well as increased anxiety about job stability. Some online faculty reported negative feelings about working more, while in turn feeling they should be doing something to help the community with COVID-19. Next slide.
And this is our revised model of the psychosocial fit, where in order to gain control, we see people increasing work time. That was primarily the land-based faculty. We did see negative changes in the ambiance of how people thought about their home and their workspace there, and negative emotions and feelings of guilt were present in both online and in land-based faculty. Next slide.
Limitations. The findings provide a limited reflection of the experience of both online and land-based faculty adapting to self-isolation due to COVID-19. The sample size for the current research, while reaching saturation for the qualitative findings, was quite small for quantitative interpretation. Therefore, to the extent we wish to generalize quantitative findings, the results are presented tentatively and would benefit from continued study and replication with a larger sample. Next slide.
And conclusions. Findings suggest that perceived stress, sense of control, and satisfaction may be 3 variables that are particularly salient to both online and land-based faculty working in response to self-isolation during COVID-19. Findings also suggest that employers of land-based faculty who've been required to work virtually may want to consider faculty satisfaction and stress relative to their employee change in work environment. Promoting a sense of control for employees in their home workspace and how they do their work may increase employees' job satisfaction. Seems like an easy solution for a lot of employers to make in order to make their employees a little more comfortable working from home. Next slide. And questions.
Good answer. Ooh, we have some questions in the chat, Lee.
You want to take the first one there?
Sure. Hold on here. Let me scroll. Okay, let's see. From Alicia. Hi, Alicia. Alicia asks, are you planning another replication study with an increased sample size and better representation of land-based faculty? That is definitely the next obvious step, and we are talking about that. And that question brings up how best to recruit land-based faculty. So we've been kind of talking about how we might go about that. There certainly are some online survey groups where that might be something that we could do. So yes, we are hoping to do something like that.
And from Tony Perry. Hi, Tony. Were all the variables assessed with a single Likert question? Yes, they were. Were there published valid measures of workplace satisfaction, work-related stress control that you considered using? There are. They tend to be longer, and they don't tend to be related to home. So it's why we decided to go with just something short so we would get people to actually respond to the questions. But it's certainly something that would be worth following up with, would be a longer, more detailed type of measure. The problem is, though, that they don't tend to be home related. They tend to be, you know, looking at it from more of a situation where you're in a different environment. Like the faculty ones tend to be like in a university environment and talking about things related to that.
All right.
Morris.
From Morris. He said, nice work. Very much enjoyed your presentation. As a participant in your previous study on home as workplace, I can also attest to the added value of the creative use of photo voice in that study. Did you consider using photo voice in the current study as well? I think we talked about this. I think we did really enjoy, to be honest. I thought the use of photo voice was particularly creative, and I know that Lee can speak to that a little bit more. We did talk about that a little bit in the very beginning, but for the purposes of this, we were looking to, kind of address different questions. So we didn't end up following through with any of that.
Yeah, I agree. I love photo voice. And it was really fun in our first study. We had people take pictures of their work area, and it told you a lot about them and about how they approach their work, that type of thing. It would be very interesting to do. We had to pull this together so quickly, time-wise, that it just seemed like it was too much to try to incorporate photos. But it's something I think it would be definitely interesting to do. I suspect you would see a lot more land-based faculty who were working at their kitchen table and hadn't probably still set up a structured environment that so many online faculty tend to do. They are much more likely to have even an area in their bedroom or whatever to work, as opposed to right in the middle of the whole family environment. But that would be great. I'd love to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Gary and Morris. I don't think we missed any other questions.
Wonderful. Well, very interesting information. And as somebody as myself who works in faculty development, and I work with faculty quite often, this is really enlightening. So thank you so much for sharing. And please do know that this session will be uploaded to ScholarWorks. Here's a list of some references as well, if anyone wants to take a snap of those before it gets uploaded to ScholarWorks. That recording should be there no later than November 1st. So if you missed any part of this, or you want to tell fellow colleagues about it, because it is very pertinent to what we do, please feel free to refer them to ScholarWorks. Thank you so much, Lee and Amy. This was, once again, very great to soak in. And to all of our attendees, thank you for carving out time. And I hope that you refer back to the app and join us for our upcoming one of our final plenary sessions. There are 2 offerings coming up next hour. Thank you all, and I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day.
Thanks, Lita.
Thank you.